Right, so even though this video is about the rhythm, I wanted to start with the tracks. The tracks has done me a big touch. Since I've got it, I've released quite a few packs with Isotonic, some free ones. If you've been following the channel, check them out. And I found it really good, really inspiring. It's helped me to write songs. The sequencer is great. Being able to control external synthesizers is brilliant as well. It simulates them. I spoke about all this before. Really, really good. I had a Korg Electribe, and I got rid of it, and I replaced it with this guy. Now I wasn't sure about the rhythm at first. When it first came out, I wasn't too impressed by it. On paper, the Electribe was better, so it didn't really represent much for me. But the thing is with the Korg Electribe is I found that I wasn't getting as much work done as I was with the tracks. You know, even though it is a groove box, it's got synth, it's got 16 channels, blah blah blah. It wasn't very fast, especially compared to the tracks. So I thought I'd give this a try. Took me a while. So I thought I'd go over my thoughts with it. It's definitely got another layer to the tracks. There's something on top of the simplicity of the tracks that you have to get used to, but once you do, it all becomes quick. It all becomes just as quick as the tracks was. So what I thought I'd do is go over the other layers, which I found difficult. So again, I watched other tutorials, the Novation ones, and I didn't get it. So I'm going to go over the stuff that confused me. So normally on the tracks you've got all your samples, you go down, and they're all there. You'll notice when I go down to the bottom, it's blank, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So you've got loops in here. This is what comes. Oh no, this isn't what comes with. This is mine. So this was a test that I did when I first got it. But it's useful because we can do a couple of things. So I think the first thing we'll talk about is probably the hardest thing that I found. Chopping up breaks. Let's do that one, it's nice and simple. So the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure it's selected. Then you want to go to note. Now you can go. I'm not going to go over resampling breaks in order to get them in time. You can work that out or watch other videos, but essentially you've got sample mode, which is flicking through your samples, and you've got note mode, which once you've selected one will let you play it on a different note. But if you wanted to slice this up, what you want to do is you want to go to your sample, this one, and you want to press sample mode again. Now we've got this menu. On the bottom right it says slice. If you click that, you've got 4, 8, 16 divisions. It automatically does 16. So the next thing you need to do is just press note. Go to sample, make sure it's done 16. Now I'd argue that they're not great slices. So let's see what else it offers. Let's go to 8. Again, don't really like it. So if you come out of this, press sample again, back to where you was, and press note again, and hold it down. Now we can go. start position. So for argument's sake, I'm not going to chop it into 16ths. I'm just going to leave it as intended. Chuck a couple of shuffles in there. And I need to go into top and take the tempo off because it's sinking. Oops. But if we want individual slices of this, put it on 16ths. See, this is where it gets confusing. There we go. So it's all about just working it. Just got to listen carefully. Like if you listen carefully to that, you can hear that it doesn't start straight away. That's better. So that's reasonable. Now I could have chopped that shuffle into 2, and I could have sequenced the shuffle as well. So all doable, but way quicker than the elect drive. In most cases, if I scrap this for a minute and go to a new track, make sure it's selected. Sometimes I find that you trigger it once and it doesn't always click onto it. So press sample, choose slice, it's already on 16, go back to note. This one it's chopped alright. Let's try another one. Because I really do think this is the most important thing on the track, slicing. So let's find another one. Lovely if it had transient slicing as well. So see where I'm auditioning these and it's not actually changing the colour. It did there. So now we've got it in 16 again, go to note. It didn't do a good job there. It's hit and miss. Sometimes it's really good, sometimes it's not. Again, new project, go back, find a drum break, see it's not changed colour, make sure it has. Now go to sample, put slice on. Now when you go back to note, seems to have done a good job there again. Normally when I'm chopping anyway, I'm only looking for 3 or 4 slices that are decent, so you can hear. And now we can just edit this one while it's playing. It's a good way to change drums up here, because you can lock this. So we'll add that there once we've stopped deleting notes. Put it on velocity. Oh, that's interesting. You can't lock the start position. I thought you'd be able to do that. Never mind. So let's get rid of this, it's just taking too long. Let's try chopping that. So that's that. Chopping sometimes is hit and miss, but if you work at it, it's definitely doable, not a problem. What was next? Yeah, beyond that was sampling. Sampling is probably it's probably a lot easier than chopping, to be fair. Okay, so if you listen to my sounds, I've got stuff first column, second column, third, fourth, fifth, and then nothing. If you go right down to the bottom, got nothing. And if you go into sample record, these are all your samples. When you see red ones, it's because there's nothing there. They're empty slots. Now you could say, done like that kick, so you can clear it. Gone. Now it becomes red, so you know there's nothing there. Next, you've got all these buttons on the bottom. First one's threshold. Second one's -12 if you need it. Resample and monitor. Now if you're resampling, you don't want monitor on because you're going to get feedback. If you're monitoring, you want resample off. It's going to become useful in a minute. So what we're going to do is we're going to monitor. We don't want resample on. We don't need the threshold. Oh, we do want a threshold, sorry. And we don't need -12. The way I've got this hooked up at the moment is the tracks is out, or headphone output is going into the rhythm. But the micro freak is going into the tracks. So the micro freak is going from the tracks into the rhythm. So if I play the micro freak, you'll hear it through the rhythm. Just to make sure that 2's down. Yeah, it is. So got resample off. Don't need -12. We've got threshold on, and we have monitor on. Okay. So now I want to resample the micro freak. All you got to do is press the empty slot, press record, press it again when you're finished. Now let's go to a new track. Let's go to 1, go right down to the bottom. So now you can play it polyphonically, that's really easy. The other thing is when you're recording, see this meter going up. You want to clear them, just press clear on them. What I tend to do now is when I'm making packs is I'll deliberately leave a whole page free. If it's a hip hop pack, you're going to want to be sampling your own cuts. A good bit of advice, what I did is I sat there with my phone. If I go on to this one, I sat there with my phone plugged into it with just a mono cable plugged into the left input and recorded loads of cuts. I was then able to do this album. Okay, so let's get on to the drum tracks, or the tracks in general. You may have noticed that we've got 8 here that are all usable. So if we're onto a new project here, all usable. The other thing that's really good is this sidechain. Now you've got the ability to, well, sidechain 8 channels. I mean, sometimes what I would do is I would probably reserve channel 8 as a sidechain channel. So this way, I can sidechain, I can make stuff duck when I want it to duck, rather than tying it to the kick. If, for example, in I don't know, a happy hardcore tune, it goes boom, 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 boom. When it does that boom, 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 whatever sidechain to it is going to duck for a long time, and you might not want that. You might want it to still sort of be like boom, 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 boom. So in that scenario, you don't want it to duck to the kick. You want it to duck to a separate thing. In a DAW, you would do the same. So it's a good tip to maybe save one to duck to. So everything will duck to that 8. When you go to sidechain, at first it was a bit confusing because every time I hit it, it's a different colour. But what I realised is it's just doing it to the track. So if you're on 5 and you press sidechain, you're going to get the same colour. You're going to get the purple at the top. If you're on 7 and you hit sidechain, you're going to get blue at the top. So it corresponds to what, I don't even know if the tracks does this, but it corresponds, so that's really nice. Makes it a lot easier for you. But yeah, like I was saying, if you wanted to, if you had a kick drum on 1, I forget it, it's not working, this one. Let's go to here. You have a kick drum on 1 and you have a bass sound there and there. It's just not gonna, it's not always gonna work with the sidechain. So it's a good idea to say have, yeah, there's a good example. That's the only thing that's a challenge. Trying to find what channel you're on. Now if this kick does that, now you sidechain this to the kick. You notice when it does the double up, it disappears for too long. So instead of that, let's have this here, and let's make that sidechain, which was 6 I think, let's make it sidechain to 8 instead, and then let's turn the volume of 8 down. Make sure that it's sidechain to it. Go. So now it's in time. Not very loud, but it's in time. But it's not ducking to the kick. So that's really handy to do. It's nice to have these 8 tracks. It makes things a lot easier. I know I'm not necessarily giving the best examples of these in some scenarios, but really handy having 8 tracks, really handy. Another thing I've been doing is sidechaining the clap to the kick, if it's something like a house tune. So you've got one clap that kind of disappears when the kick comes in, but then sort of you hear the tail of it, and then you've got one on top of that for the higher, well, not for the higher end, you know, for the main layer. That's a good trick. Again, having these 8 tracks gives me a lot of ideas for processing and stuff like that as well. Resampling's really easily done. So to resample, find an empty slot, press record, do whatever you want. We could play the track now. And now we have a loop of our track if it was one. Really, really handy. Like I say, when you're resampling, make sure that you've got monitor off. When you're monitoring, make sure you've got resample off, because I've noticed that they interfere with each other. I've bounced a tune, well, I've resampled a tune in here, and then I've put it next to, in another pattern, the original song with all the sequencing in it, and you could hear the difference. I had to redo it again because I'd left monitor on, so it does make a difference. There's more feedback, or there is feedback. Okay, so that kind of goes over all the features and the extra layers. Once you get over that, it's really good. I mean, you can parameter lock most of these things. It's a bit disappointing to know that you can't parameter lock start position. Oh no, you can. I don't know why that didn't work before, but that is doable. There isn't even a sound there. So you can see it jumping. It doesn't play the last one. So I've got a good example of this actually. If I go to this rhythm, this techno pack that me and Eves are creating. Okay. Somewhere here is a bass sound. So that's really good. That means that you could technically get a break, and you could make different notes start at different points in the breaks. That's really interesting. I'm gonna have to muck around with that myself. So that's really interesting. Okay, so now I'm just gonna go over a couple of the bad things or not bad things, but things that I don't necessarily like, or I don't think work as 100% well. I think it somehow lacks a bit of sub or bass. I hate to say something like that, but I almost feel like I should be running it through my desk with a little bit. I am running it into the desk, but I feel like I should be boosting it with a little bit low end. If I put a kick drum on the tracks and I put a kick drum on here, they don't sound the same. Definitely not. And also I would say that the distortion on here seems to be good for some things but not good for other things, whereas on the tracks I prefer the distortion on the tracks, funny enough. I didn't think I'd say that. At the start, when I first heard examples of the distortion on here, I thought I preferred it, but as a tool I prefer the one on the tracks. There is a way of also getting a filter envelope, I've noticed, if you was to automate, say like you can do it by hand. So if you was to get a bass sound, I think I've got one on here somewhere. That's annoying because it's already a stab. like that. Now this one. So it is definitely doable. Once you made a stab, you know, obviously you can duplicate it to a million places like I've done. And I've just done that quick with a cigarette in my hand, you know, that could definitely be done. I've used that to avail on some of the other tunes that I've done. Really good, yeah. So to summarise, I think this thing's good. You know, I've gone over a couple of points that I'm not too sure about yet that I think could maybe have a bit of work done to them. The grid effects are good. Once you customise them, great for like hip hop if you're trying to make old hip hop and you want that crackle, or you want it to sound a bit like, you know, it's coming from a record and it's sort of wobbling a bit like it's warped. Really good. You can lock the effects as well, which is really cool. The time ones, they're alright. I suppose they're as good as you are. Other than that, there's not really much else to say. Really quick, really good. I mean, if you're sitting there like I was the other day trying to write a hip hop album, it came together in one day, if I'm honest. Like 8 of the 12 tracks I think I did were all done in one night. I spent an hour and 20 minutes sampling and then maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours writing the songs. With hip hop, I find, you know, the cuts is what writes the songs most of the time. You hear something and you're like, wow, yeah, that works really well, and you go from there. I think whereas the tracks is more of a like, you make, you know, banging dance floor tracks on it and you really concentrate on getting your bass line really tight and your synth lead really tight and switching projects to keep the song interesting. On here, you feel like you almost don't need to do as much of that. Like you can almost be a bit lazy with stuff. And that's a good thing. It's because there's more. But at the same time, I have to find my, you know, I have to make myself aware that no, I'm using the rhythm now. So try and take the same ethos that you take from the tracks. You know, every track matters, and put that onto here. Make sure your bass line is as tight and everything like that. And where I say this lacks sub a bit, what I've tried to do is introduce the tracks into it. That definitely helps. But again, once it's on here, I just feel like it's missing maybe 60 hertz, 40 hertz. It's missing something, very slightly as well. Like it's nothing to moan about, definitely, but it's just something that I've noticed compared to the tracks. Which, like I say, I'm kind of a power user of both of them at the moment with these packs, and I actually like them. I think they're great. I get more tunes finished with the tracks and the rhythm than I ever did on Ableton, and I've been making music for over 20 years. I've used groove boxes before. I've had different ones. I've had an AR48 Zoom, which was alright, but it had a lot of problems. The Electribe, same thing really, needed an update. This out of the box is great. I didn't expect to write an album in a night or a day. Yeah, night. I'd never expect to do that. So yeah, they are different beasts. You really have to sort of start thinking about your sample game when you're using a sampling. Like, have you got the samples to put on it in the first place, or are you prepared to sit there and sample stuff? Because if you're not, then the tracks is probably better for you. If you're not, you know, if you're not a prolific sampler, and I've had to change the way that I do things to get the most out of this by sampling things like the Micro Freak, by sampling the tracks, and by bringing in my extensive sample library that I've collected over the last 20 years. And if I didn't have that, I probably wouldn't have bought a sampler. I probably would have bought something like a drum machine and then gone from there. So it's definitely something to think about. It is its own beast. How it works with the tracks together, it can do a lot of stuff together. I mean, the way I've got it set up is, if I was to take everything on here, and take everything on here, and I was to go to projects, on here, and I change project on the tracks, you can see it change project on here. So you could correlate your projects together and use them both as a powerhouse with technically 16 channels if you've got the 2 synths as well. I haven't got to that stage yet. I'm sure I will do. But that's it. That's it for my review on the Circuit Rhythm. If I had to score it, I'd personally give it like 8.9 out of 10. Possibly higher, possibly 9.4 or something like that. That's probably as high as I'd go. For what it is and what it costs, it's very good. If you like, I mean, I've got a techno pack on it now and a hip hop pack on it now for myself, and they are incredible. You know, I don't find myself wanting or needing anything else. If I need or want anything else, I'll sample it off my phone onto the unit. It's probably not the best quality in the world, but it's doing the job. Or if I want a clearer sample, I'll either make it on the computer or find a sample of it in my library. So yeah, I would score it very highly. The sequencer is so good on it that really, if you've used the tracks, all you're really going to have to learn is the sampling thing, which I showed you is pretty easy. And the slicing, if you're prepared to put the time in the slicing, it's not that difficult. It's just hard for me to show you with one hand and a camera. But yeah, thanks for your time, guys. Hopefully someone's found this useful. Like and subscribe, and hopefully I'll do more.